Hi, I hope everyone's doing okay. I've been thinking about what to say, and over the past month, I've been on new medication. I have anxiety. Priests have anxiety, and you can't pray that shit away all the time. And so, my doctor prescribed a change in medication, and so my anxiety manifests itself in sleeplessness. And so I found myself sleeping far too much. So, anyway, I'm back to my normal self and not feeling as anxious, but even pills can't take away your anxiety that much without knocking you completely out. So, I was thinking about the kind of watching videos and stuff. And at the moment, the big thing that I'm on to is watching videos on how to play and playthroughs of the One Ring Second Edition. And I'm finding myself wanting. I haven't found anything that's completely satisfying as yet. And I don't know if it's me or if it's the system. I think that the system is in theory great, but Forbidden Land seems to be more straightforward. And I find the One Ring, you have to jump around a bit, especially with weapons and stuff, and just understanding some of the subtleties, and also just figuring out conflicts and how combat uh, resolves appropriately. And so I've been watching these playthroughs, and again, none of them are clicking with me. And I think part of it is that I went from a place 2 or 3 years ago where I was watching a lot of playthroughs, and I started to see some of the problems in online play, especially online play directed specifically for the purpose of self promotion and of trying to reach toward Critical Role and their level of success. Obviously, that is a huge feat, and I don't think anybody has come close. There are some excellent GMs out there, and I'm not too sure if it's our expectations or my expectations of what role playing is. I think I've told everybody before that I watch, or I have watched Professor Dungeon Master's table at his home with his wife and his friends, and it was the closest thing. This is a Patreon exclusive for him, and it's the closest thing I've found to something that resembles what I'm used to around the table or playing the game. He uses his own creation, and of course uses his own home rules and stuff, and they're very compelling and very accessible. With not a lot of crunch. It's focused on gameplay and creativeness, and that's, I guess, what I've been used to in around the tables that I've played with. And so I put a lot of thought into what is it that I'm struggling with, and I've spoken about this a lot, and I'm not too sure if this resonates with you. Watching online games used to be very compelling to me. I watched Chris Perkins and his D&D 5th edition show with Strix and all those characters for quite some time, maybe 2 years. And I found it highly entertaining. I never felt that they were over the top with their characterizations. And I seemed to be pleased. And then there was some internal drama that had nothing to do with the game, I don't believe. And the Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro obviously decided that this was inappropriate to continue in its current form. And so I believe it was a Monday night show, stopped functioning in the way that it had, and the cast changed. And so there's just been something lacking. I see this falsehood, I guess, is the closest thing that I can describe it as. I'm almost trying too hard. And I thought about it a lot, about whether or not this was my problem and not their problem. They're obviously hitting an audience that enjoys watching that style of play. And I was wondering, is it my place? Is it any of our places to cast aspersions on the way that other people enjoy the game? I had a game where the dungeon master said, "You're not having fun the way I want to have fun. You're not doing fun properly," I think is what he said. And I thought about that in terms of gatekeeping and this current kind of lingo that everybody's using in different ways. Stop gatekeeping, we need more of it, or, you see it from all sides. And you see it from all sides, and you very rarely see kind of a middle of the road approach that's looking at the dynamics of what's happening around the table online. And obviously, they're producing something online to watch and to be entertaining. And, whether they're doing voices or whether they're trying to get into their roles, it seems more like amateur theater. And as somebody who, when I was at McGill, was involved in amateur theater on the stage, like not on the stage, but at the stage level, kind of the managing stuff. I'm not going to get into it, but essentially, it gave me a perspective of the pros and cons of learning the trade. And there are some who are very good at it, and there are some who aren't. And the ones who aren't don't captivate. And that's why we have stars. Stars captivate us. And so anyway, in my deliberations and in my thoughts, I thought about control and the level of control that some people within the punditry of tabletop role-playing games waft on about, and about pronoun use and liberal values and conservative values. And there's one particular pundit who refuses to play with somebody who has colored hair. I'm trying to wrap my mind around why you wouldn't. And maybe this is just me, is that it's the person that I'm playing with. I don't care if they've got tattoos all over their face, or if they've got blue hair, green hair, pink hair, or whatever, or no hair. I don't care. I don't care how they identify themselves. I've always thought how they treat other people, if they treat other people with respect, and if they themselves have a level of respect for themselves, and can value the differences within humanity, then they're probably the best type of people that I want to have around the table. So, when I think about this guy saying, you're not having fun the way I want to have fun, or you're not doing fun properly. He said it as a joke, but there was laughs because we realized that this is indeed funny because in a way it's true, as the Simpsons adage goes. It's funny because it's true. And I guess it reminded me of something that is a pastoral story, but I think it's one that we all should mark when we go to a table and we think about conflictual issues that come up and arise, our preconceived notions when we go to the table and we see somebody that doesn't fit within our kind of ordinary group. So I'll give you a story from my past. I am a priest, and so I went through what we call CPE. It's clinical pastoral education, and in clinical pastoral education, what you do is you stage, which is, I guess, the closest thing to on-the-job training. It's a French term. Sorry, I grew up in Quebec, so stagiaire. So a stage was kind of like, it was kind of like on-the-job training, but it involved a lot more than just doing somebody else's job. You had to reflect, you had to come back, and so CPE really was about learning more about who you were than it was about learning about how to deal pastorally with a situation. I know some of you who are watching are not Christians, who have no belief system, and that's fine. But this might help you understand how the process goes. So I was in a group of about 8. I think we were a group of 8. And I was an Anglican. And at the time, I brewed beer from scratch, all grain, cultivated my yeast, had Irwin Mayer flasks all over the place with yeast cultures, and brewed in stainless steel Coke containers with a beer fridge and everything that was temperature controlled for lager yeast and all sorts of stuff, with beer taps and everything. And when I got together with this other group of 7 participants, one was a Roman Catholic priest who was taking CPE, and the other 6 were all either from a Baptist, Congregationalist, Pentecostal type of background. And they were, I don't think any of them were ordained. I think they were in the process of what I think that they call receiving their call, whatever. And when I told them, I'm an Anglican, and they said, well, what are your hobbies? And I said, well, I play role-playing games and I brew beer. Well, that was it. I was the bad guy. And I was pretty much ostracized by the group. Because I had played role-playing games, and that was just evil, even then, and we're talking about the late 90s. And brewing beer was, I might as well have told them that I was worshiping at the foot of Satan. So it was not a fun experience from that point of view. But I was there to learn how to deal with pastoral situations. And so this course was offered through the Université de Montréal, and and it was offered at the Royal Victoria Hospital that now has changed, but it was at the Royal Victoria Hospital and the Montreal Neurological Institute. And I was assigned the floor of the glioblastoma unit. And a glioblastoma is a rapid growth of a brain tumor. And I was assigned a particular floor. And in those days, it's very different now. Nowadays, you have to be given permission by the individual, not by the family, but by the individual to visit. You can't just walk into a room and say, hey, I'm from Pastoral Services. Do you want to talk? Or do you want to pray? Or whatever. You can't do that in Canada any longer. You need to be invited in. There are certain chaplains who are hired on by the hospitals, and they're able to have a little bit more access in order to ask whether or not they'd like a visit or any pastoral ministry. But really, there's much more regulations. And so anyway, so as I was doing this course, and this has a role-playing game connection in a second. So anyway, I'm going along, and we do verbatims. So a verbatim is you go into a situation, a pastoral situation, and you report verbatim, word for word, what you can recall. So you don't go in with a recorder. You go in with your brain, you remember the conversation, or maybe you go in with that which is flawed. You shouldn't, but I guess we were affected by the knowledge that we were going to have to write a verbatim. So you'd go into a room, you'd meet somebody, you'd have a conversation, you'd come back, you'd write down what you recalled. You'd go to class, and amongst the 8 and the teacher or professor, you would do the verbatim, and then other people would reflect back what they heard. So anyway, so the situation arose that I went into a room, and there was about, I believe he was kind of late 20s. And he was dying. He had he was terminal. When I came into the room, it was dark. It was a 2-person room. He was closer to the door, so it was naturally darker. The room was very dark. His light was off. His curtain was drawn completely. And I went in, and I kind of said hello, I think was my first word, because I wanted, and I got some grunt of a response, and I drew the curtain back because I got the response that, yeah, what do you want, basically. And then I said, hi, I'm so-and-so from Pastoral Services. And he said, fuck off. Get the fuck out of here. And I didn't know what to say. And I looked for what seemed like an eternity, and he just ranted about, getting the fuck out. And so I got the fuck out. I didn't say anything. I didn't say goodbye. I pulled the curtain back. I didn't say God bless or anything like that. I just kind of was in shock, and I left. So I went back, and I wrote my verbatim, and I wrote my verbatim as it happened, and that was it. Like, that was it. Fuck off. That, and then more fucking off, and that was it. So anyway, so I came back to class after writing it. I think there was a 24-hour period, and everybody was doing their verbatims, and I was so shy because I really didn't have anything else that was significant to talk about, so I submitted that. And it was basically just, you know, the description of the room, the description of the person, and how he looked, and he looked fine. But he had an IV and all that stuff, and there was surgery that had happened. But at that time, we had access to files, so I knew that he was terminal, and he would have known that he was terminal. So anyway, so I'm everybody's reporting and everybody's talking about how they prayed with their person and how they, it was just all goodness and light and wonderful news, and everybody was there going, "Oh, great job! Oh, that was really significant." And Robert, who was our professor, was so good at his clinical pastoral job. He was amazing as a professor. And so he just looked, and he was gently nodding his head as he looked, and you could see him looking around. And I'm very perceptive, and so I was watching the way he was reacting, because of course a good student will always mark in their brains how the professor is reacting, especially given this kind of dynamic, reflective learning. So anyway, so he said, Douglas, what do you think? Or what's yours? So anyway, so I said, well, I don't have anything really to present. He said, well, I see that you have something in your hand. Present it. So I said, well, I'm gonna read it exactly as it was, and I did. And I did say, I preface it by saying, look, I did a crappy job and I feel horrible, and does anybody have any suggestions? Because we're supposed to be learning how to deal with the situations, right? And so we're supposed to be giving critical thought. Now, everybody else had done all this kind of jazzy Christian stuff, and everybody was self-congratulatory, and I had already been labeled as the black sheep of the group. And so I was embarrassed, and I said to everybody, look, I'm embarrassed by this, and I failed this one, I think I said, before I read it. And Robert said, read it. So I read it out, and I read it as it was. Which did not do me any favors, because the F word is the F word. I mean, even Google doesn't like the F word, or YouTube, whatever. So yeah, let's blow people up, but and worry about boobs, but let's be afraid of the F word. Anyway, so they're scandalized that I swore, but it wasn't me. I said, I'm sorry. This is what the guy said, and I said, and somebody said, what? No prayer? No, God bless. You didn't. What type of Christian are you? I think was one of the comments, honestly. And anyway, everybody took their pot shots at how horrible it was, and so Robert said to the class, so who do you think did the best job? Who do you think dealt with the patient in the best way, and who reflected about themselves in the best way? And everybody identified a couple of individuals who were kind of always the class superstars in the group's mind. Even I thought that, they just are a natural at this. So anyway, the professor said, I have an opinion of who I think did the best. And everybody was like waiting for one of those two people to be chosen. He said, Douglas did the best. And they all were like, what? And they were amazed. Why did I do the best job? I left. I didn't say a word. I left. So he said, what he has demonstrated is giving control to the patient. And he said, think about it. And everybody was like, oh, what? He said, think about it. this young man is dying. He's got maybe weeks, maybe a month to live. He doesn't look sick, but he's going to die. He said nurses come in and draw his blood every day. They are constantly poking, prodding, sending him to CAT scans, sending him to MRIs, sending him for this evaluation and that evaluation, but he's terminal. They continue to shine lights in his eyes in the middle of the night every couple of hours, waking him up so he can't even get proper sleep. They take his blood pressure as if this is something that matters anymore, all the friggin' time. They give him his meds. He has no control over his life. He said, what I did was give him for one moment of his day control. I didn't realize what I had done. He said by not saying anything and by just listening to him, that probably made him feel inadvertently the best he's felt in a long time, because he had control. Well, when we speak about, role-playing games and we speak about agency, I think as GMs and as players, we forget about the individuals around the table have lives that they're trying to escape for these few moments. For an hour, 2, 3, 4, they come into a game with a hope. And their hope is that they're going to accomplish something great. That they're going to roll well. I mean, it really is a gambling addiction, Dungeons and Dragons. It's a gambling addiction. We're hoping for the best. Certain games like, the Strider mode from the One Ring is designed by the same people, Matt Click and Sean Tompkin, who have also designed Starforged, and of course the very famous Ironsworn, built on, powered by the Apocalypse system. And I think that everybody would be probably not wrong in saying it's the best implementation of that system. And they've geared it towards, I think, the 2/3 failure, 2/3 challenging. And the same for Strider mode, because they want you to kind of fail, and it says in the book that they want you to push ahead. They want you to really push the storyline along. So they want complications so that the story isn't boring and you just go around kind of making up a story on your own, right? That's why we have tables. And of course, Gary Gygax in his original DMG gave us tons of tables in order for us to have the flexibility and in order for us not to get stumped. But we don't take seriously enough the fact that we want to win the night. We want to feel like we've accomplished something. We want to feel like we've had some level of control over our lives. I started off by speaking about my anxieties, and I have lots of anxieties. Family anxieties, financial anxieties, work anxieties. Trust me, work anxieties, lots of work anxieties. People think that our jobs are just sitting around praying. They're not. They're dealing with real people with real problems. And even though the majority of my people are older, they are dealing with their own mortality. And as somebody in my late 50s, I'm at that point where I'm starting to see friends pass and see in my own body, aging starting to take hold. And so, there are lots of stressors. So when I play a role-playing game, I want to be someone else. I want to do something brilliant. I want to think outside of the box. I do want to be challenged. But I also want to be around a group of like-minded people. But I can't control them. I can't make them make me have a good time. I can't force them to make them have fun the way I want to have fun. And I think when I was thinking about what to talk about for kind of the role-playing people who tend to watch me, is to kind of offer this as a lesson. I try to do things differently than the other kind of pundits and people who are out there doing the basically a repetitive same old. I like to give some context, and I like to give us something to chew on and think about. Have you thought about that? That maybe the person who is making a statement, whether it's a physical statement that you may or may not agree with, maybe you're drawn closer to the person who, let's say, is out there, whatever that means to you or to them. Maybe you're much more comfortable dealing with the shy, conservative dressing types, the button-down collar types. But have you thought about this might be the only thing that a person is able to control in their week when they get together around either a real table or a virtual table? That they have hopes and dreams coming into it that are far beyond the creation of a character. They're far beyond just what we want to say is simply a game. We can say all we want, that a role-playing game is just a game, but it's not. And this is where it differs from a board game. A board game has set rules, set boundaries, usually a set time limit, unless you're playing diplomacy or Monopoly. You have something around the table, you roll dice, or you play a what used to be called a German board game, a European-style board game, or a non-dice rolling board game where you put more thought and it's choice-based. It's still a very boundary-driven game for the most part. Role-playing has psychological expectations. And if you're not prepared to be honest about that, about yourself, and about the others around the table, especially as a GM, then you're not doing it right. Sorry, but you're not. If you're not thinking about the other people, not just having fun because of your creation, so the railroad analogy, and don't give me this bullshit that people really don't like that GMs don't do the railroad. It's really there, almost all the time, in some fashion. When groups go off script, no GM can really tell me that it doesn't drive them nuts in some way. You might find it fun at the end of the night, but it's like, I planned this so much, and then they went off and did their own thing. I've got to wrangle them back so that I have my storyline. And that's okay. You want to have fun too. But I think that when we speak about, well, we can't railroad and we can't do this, and it's all about agency and all this stuff, yeah, it is, and yeah, it isn't. There's a lot. It's a very complex game, and that's why it's so much fun, and that's why it creates so much dissension, and why it creates so much controversy within groups, and why groups fail and groups fall apart, and why friendships get taxed in it. And that's why online groups and why GMs have pay to play. I always thought to myself, geez, that's so horrible, hiring a GM. Well, if you're going to hire a GM, you better hire a good one that has a lot of really strong empathetic tendencies, if not a strong EI, emotional intelligence. If they don't, the group probably will fail. If it's all about the rules and it's all about their own ideas, and they're not willing to kind of motivate the group to be a group and to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of not only the characters, but subtly help people listen to one another in a group dynamic and team dynamic way, so that there's a lot of management of how individuals, as individuals, not as characters, cooperate and work together. Me saying that I failed with this pastoral situation, this verbatim that I presented, was very unfair to myself, because what I did was I listened to what he had to say, and I didn't argue back, and I didn't give him the schlock that he didn't want. I heard what he was saying. I've said it before on the channel. Don't argue as much around the table. You're not going to change people's minds. Try to understand it from their point of view, and try to understand it from their psychological point of view. Sometimes we know people really well around the table, and so we may be able to figure out, oh, this is why this didn't work. I mean, Wesley, back in the day, with Blackmore, or before Blackmore, kind of knew the people, even though they were from the kind of Twin City areas. He kind of understood what was going on with the people that were there. I mean, they all started to get to know one another, and after a while, they were friends. I mean, if you watch Blackmore, the documentary, and I do advise you to watch this documentary, you can see that they're still friends. They still gather around Arneson's table. They play with his daughter. They continue because it had meaning far beyond the game. It was a belonging. And I'm not a megachurch fan for a lot of reasons. I'm not even a 100+ church fan. I like teeny tiny churches that are barely functioning financially, because it really is a family. I mean, you come in and hopefully the doors are open to all. That, I think, is the biggest failure. And I'm not proselytizing here. I'm trying to give an analogy. So people are able to walk through the door. Anybody. That's the way it's supposed to be, that anybody can come into the door and anybody can sit down. That's why we don't have them in our homes, is because people are intimidated, whereas in a building, it was supposed to be unintimidating. That's a whole other argument, right? Anyway, and so you have kind of a group of people who all come together, who all have something in common, a belief system in this case. But they come into it with very different agendas. And as the leader of that group, you need to learn the particularities of the individuals to help meet their needs of what they're seeking. And I don't think that it's my role to change what they're seeking, but to help them hear themselves what they're seeking. And I think that's the same thing around the table or online, where you have different people coming together in an open space where you're supposed to be able to just come. Sometimes you don't know each other, sometimes you do, but the hope is that you get to know each other enough so that you are able to build that same level of trust that Wesley, Arneson, and eventually Gygax had about their tables, to be able to foster a more generous approach to the game. And I think that this is one of those areas that goes unnoticed within the role-playing world, at least online. I don't hear a lot of people speaking about control and agency is about making sure that we don't insult the person who's schizophrenic. I have a schizophrenic son. I understand, and yet I don't understand, because I think that we need to be sensitive, but sensitive within reason. It's like the peanut allergy thing. We're all stopping eating peanuts, but we still have peanuts. How do we manage the rights of those who love their peanuts and those who are going to die of anaphylactic shock if they have peanuts around them? Our world is a complicated place, and we navigate as best we can, but we don't want, I think, to impose so much control or give so much liberties that we forget what we're doing, and forget the game element. So there's a balance between listening and hearing and this emotional intelligence that I've been speaking about giving control, understanding, like being in the shoes of the other person, understanding that maybe their lives are so friggin' miserable, or they're so desperately depressed, and this is the only joy that they might have in their whole entire week. Maybe their marriage sucks, and they had expectations, and those expectations have just gone to shit. Or maybe they have a very wonderful relationship that's gone to shit because of miscommunication and a lack of listening to one another, and they need a good marriage counselor. Or maybe they're young and their parents don't listen to them, or their parents are controlling, or the expectations laid on them are too great and the stress is too enormous. Playing a role-playing game involves people, and people are complicated. And I think that when I look at myself, going back to my criticisms of watching people play online, and the various offerings that are out there at the moment in the games that I'm interested in, to try to better learn the game, I need to find that generosity of spirit again. And to maybe be a little more generous in listening to what they're offering. Maybe I'm being too critical, and maybe I'm imposing too many restrictions. I don't have to subscribe, and I don't have to like everything that I watch on YouTube. As much as people are binging and donging and putting the scrolly thing with a bell and all that stuff, oh man. Just, you can watch and learn and gauge and then decide. But around your table and around your own games, think about these things. I think that there's a lesson for all of us, that control of the individual and agency of the characters are two very different things. And we need to be careful, we need to think. And so this is my diatribe for today. Amen, amen. There's my sermon for my, my RPG sermon. But it's one of those areas where, and I haven't played online for over a year. And I'm shy about it because I'm not sure if I will ever be satisfied with a group of people who are like-minded, who are interested in developing trust relationships and interested in just focusing on gameplay, but not necessarily leaving the fun behind, but not making that the main reason why we're getting together is because we need to make new friends. But that it people don't take themselves too seriously, and people aren't looking to become the next stars of the internet. Again, it just makes me think. And so, as you see, I post about once a month now. I've got another idea. I have something that I got. It's relatively thick. It's 50 pages. Really thick stock. It's called Jatima. And it's a lightweight TTRPG for hunting monsters in early medieval northern Europe, and it's about landscapes and monsters and the Iron Age of the far north of Europe, and it's an awesome it's awesome visually, and yet it's super hard to read because it's awesome visually. So maybe I'll talk about this at some point in a next upcoming video. I've got a couple of things that I want to kind of talk about in terms of games. I've had some really encouraging comments about a game that I had way back, about almost, I guess, 2 years ago. Maybe it was a year and a half ago. I don't know. But it was something I started, and I just got overwhelmed by it. And it was Vaesen, set in Sweden, with a German or a Prussian soldier who had taken the train and journeyed up, and I had gone to one of those sites where you can get images of conglomerated images of people who aren't real but they look real, and so I had like a cast of characters, but I got overwhelmed by the amount of work that I was putting into it, and so I don't know. I may revisit some things. I keep on having ideas, and then I just kind of get, do I really have the time to invest in this? I mean, I do have a job, and I'm very fortunate to have a job that allows me to have equipment to be able to broadcast like I do, and I seem to have found a rhythm and an editing mode that I'm comfortable with. So anyway, that was my offering for today. I hope that you appreciate it, I guess. I hope that maybe it will make you think. And maybe it's all bullshit. Maybe it's not. But that's okay. If you've stayed this far, then it must have resonated in some way with you. So look, take care. Have a great day at your table, or when you do, or prepping, or whatever you're doing. And think about these things. I think they're pretty compelling. The game beyond the game, and the management of emotional intelligence, and understanding that people have shit that they're going through that particular day, that particular week, that particular year. And coming off of COVID is not as easy for some as it is for others. And COVID has made a lot of people kind of, I'm 57 years old, so crazy is a term that we used to use without prejudice. But it does. It makes us think in a very uncharacteristic way. And so some people continue to be anxious, other people are not. And some people have been so out of communication with people, face to face especially, that I'm finding that in my own interactions, that's a huge deal. Like, people almost are either being too forward and very uncharacteristic of them, of their previous selves or the selves that you used to know, because there's almost kind of a catching up of time type of element. Anyway, take care. Bye. Come on, puppy. Come on.